All right, everybody, it's 12:05. Let's get going. Welcome. Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you're logging in from. I'm in Cocoa Beach today, so I'm on the East Coast. I'm based in Austin, Texas, though. My name is Greg Cooper, and I am the president of Offered. A little bit of background. Today, we're going to be going over our Offered OS. It's an operating system that we have designed and created to make commercial real estate transactions more efficient using large data, AI, and algorithms. I have been with Offered for about 4.5 years. The company's been in existence for 7 years now. It was founded by Travis Reese, our CEO and founder, real visionary in the industry. Travis was formerly, before Offered, he was an oil and gas executive, and he had a startup in the oil and gas services field that had a technology component to it. And him and his partners grew it quickly to be one of the largest in its field. Travis had a successful exit and wanted to redeploy his earnings or his winnings into commercial real estate assets, specifically multifamily. So Travis went out there and tried to find a broker that would help him purchase commercial real estate assets, apartment complexes in the Houston, Austin, San Antonio markets. Travis quickly found out that the traditional brokerage community wasn't really interested in helping him buy assets. They were interested in helping him. They were interested in selling their own listings. Traditional brokerage, as if you're a practitioner on the call, is mostly focused around the listing or disposition side of the business, especially the big players. So, he called companies like CBRE and JLL and asked if they would help him buy, and really they just wanted to sell their listings. So he went out and played the game that was as it was set up. He got on the distribution lists and started to get emailed offering memorandum, and got into some best and finals and lost. And Travis is a very competitive person and did not like the idea of losing, and thought that the industry seemed backwards. It didn't seem like it didn't seem fair. It didn't seem right that you didn't have agents or acquisition function, and what didn't have an acquisition function. And so he decided that there must be a better way. So what did he do? He went and bought data feeds. He bought Axiometrics and CoStar and Yardi Matrix, hired a data scientist, and started pouring through the data to see if there are any common elements, either of a property or an ownership group prior to the assets going to market. And if you could find those common elements, traits, was there a way to predict the behaviors prior to the broker getting the assets? Could you get ahead of the brokerage community? As he started to find those attributes, doing regression analysis, they then created algorithms to try to predict these traits, and lo and behold, there was deal flow. And Travis bought a few smaller deals, and then got his hands on a $100 million deal in Houston that was too big for him to take down. By the time he pivoted to find a buyer, and by the time he found a buyer, the asset had gone to market. But that was when the idea of Offered was born, and from its inception, it was a way of using big data and at the time AI, machine learning, to get an advantage over other brokers. And it wasn't a brokerage back then; it was more of an acquisition shop. Anyway, so fast forward to today, and Offered is now a full-fledged commercial brokerage, and we are going to go over today our OS, our operating system. The elements we're going to go over today are the public search feature, the acquisitions platform, which is really the first thing that was developed by Travis. We're going to then talk about what happens after we find a deal. We create an offered valuation estimate. We call it our OVE. Mostly people know it as a broker price opinion, but it's just a different way of doing it. Then we're going to go over our buyer match tool, our private sales deal room process, and then last but not least, our client dashboard. These are all of the elements of the platform that enable our brokers to have a leg up on the brokerage community in terms of how to prospect, what we're doing by ingesting. So what we're doing is ingesting huge amounts of data, property level data, demographic data, census data, contact data, enriching our contact data so that the AI team, the tech team is running AI layers and algorithms over that data and looking for predictive behaviors. Who is most likely to sell? Who is the ideal buyer for specific property? So that allows our brokers to have a leg up in terms of prospecting, and it allows our clients, the end users, to have a differentiated execution on the disposition and acquisition process in commercial real estate. So let me just dive in, and we're going to go over, the first thing I'm going to go over is public search. So public search used to be something that was an internal tool, but we've now launched it on our external website. So this is our Offered website. You guys can go to this after this webinar and test this out. But what we're doing is we're bringing in all of the public listings in the country. So I'm based in Austin, so I'm just going to go in here and look up Austin. And I'm just going to hit search. And so as of this morning, there's 26 public listings in Austin, Texas that are for sale. The only way you would have been able to find this information previously you would have to been on all of the email distribution lists for all of the agents in Austin, and or you have to go into each agent's website and search it. So let's just take a look at this is Saratoga Ridge. That's the price per door. That's a property unit mix, sale and loan data, property characteristics, so details of the property, and then demographic insights. So this is not any of the information from the broker. This is all Offered's information. We just saw that the property is for sale, and now we're enriching it with our own data. So, let's say, is this property in a very busy part of town? Yeah, look, the heat map, the traffic heat map. Is this an area that's expected to grow? It's green, so it is expected to grow. How much is it going to grow? Just 0.15, but still, it's a growing area. What's medium household income? Always important for multifamily ownership groups to understand if it's at least 3 times rents, 65,000 right there. And then, crime is also always important. And the crime layer, sometimes you have to zoom out a little bit. So crime in that specific area is 160. The national average is 100. And you can actually tell what kind of crime it is. So personal crime's 45. That's pretty low. Property crime's 168. So you guys should go in here. Murders are 112. Rapes are 107. So all the information that a multifamily operator would be interested in. See history. We don't have it this time. So if this was something, so remember, this is coming up of a public website, almost like a Zillow-like experience. And if you want more information or to contact, you can also drop your little Google guy in and sort of walk the property. You can see, what it looks like. I actually know this apartment complex. You can see what the cars look like, what the surrounding area looks like. And then you contact an Offered advisor. And what this does is it creates a lead for our brokers. So if someone types into Google apartment buildings for sale in Austin, Texas, you're going to come to our site, and you'll get this experience, and you will be able to then contact an Offered advisor, a broker, to help you buy the property. So that is something, quite an innovation in the industry. We're the only ones that are doing this. I guess Zillow is the closest thing I can think of. We call it our ILS, our Internet Listing System or Service, sorry. All right, so let's jump in now. So that's public search. That used to be just something that could be seen in the back end by our brokers and by our clients, and is now open to the public. So let's log into the system, though, and you're going to see the back end of the Offered platform, the Offered OS, where this is only clients and our brokers can see it. So this is the client dashboard, which we'll go over in a minute. I really want to jump into the acquisition platform, which is really the bread and butter how Offord started. So let's go into, and by the way, guys, just save any questions till the end. I will at the end open it up for questions. So we're going to stick with the Austin theme since I'm an Austin guy. And we're going to do a search like a typical client would ask for. So we're going to do a value add search for properties in Austin. So outside public listings, that was the Zillow type experience where we're searching all the public listings. By the way, we have all the public listings, probably I'd say 95% of the public listings in the entire country Offord has on its website for multifamily, soon to be the other asset classes. So if I go to all assets though, this is going to be every asset in Austin. I'm going to go into more filters, and so we're going to do let's say 100 units to 300 units. Remember, we're going to do a value add. So value add, typically they want 1980s construction up to say 2005. They don't want student housing. They're not going to want affordable housing, because remember, value add is where they're going to go in and they're going to spend X dollars per door to improve the property, put in a dog park, spruce up the pool, and then they're going to raise rents and try to reposition the property. So if I just do that those simple filters and hit apply, it's going to show me 189 properties in Austin that meet that first set of criteria. I can always come back in here. I can look at these properties the same way that you saw me look at the you can actually go in here and shop the properties again, just like we did with the on market. You have all of the same information that you did before. This is just a property that is not on the market, that is a potential target for our team to go after. So going back though, let's look at the whole map of Austin again. And let's say, you're coming in from maybe Dallas. You don't know Austin that well, but you want to get into the Austin market. So again, you can apply all the same demographic filters to it. But a lot of times, especially with a value add program, you're going to want to know what household income is, because you want higher household income so you can push rents up. So you can take a look and go around the city and see up here in the northern part of the city, $117,000. That's pretty good. Over here, what are our 101,000? That's pretty good. What about to the east here? 83,000, still pretty good. So Austin's a pretty high income area. So in general, pretty good. 41,000 down here in San Marcos. This is where my daughter goes to school, so a lot of students down here. So that's one way of kind of getting a quick look at the market. But let's say, for instance, I want to make sure that these properties have value add potential. So what I can do is go back into filters, and I actually have a value add algorithm that looks at in-place rents of that subject property compared to similar classes around it, and then looks one class above it to see if there are the potential to raise rents by improving it. So I'm going to apply that, and the 189 is, just dropped to 86 properties, and it'll reset on the map in just a second. And remember, this is working on the entire multifamily database. I think there's 140,000 properties, so it's a data hog. So now I have 86 properties. I can either at this point save these targets, and this would then go into the back end, our data of our CRM, and our brokers would get to work to contact these ownership groups looking for books and records. But I can even slice and dice it some more. Let's say I wanted to make sure that household income was strong because I want to push rents. I can say, show me everything with a household income north of $100,000. I use my slider and just pull it out to right there. That's pretty close. Hit apply. And now it's going to even more granularly reset. And now I'm down to 32 targets. So these are 32 high value targets for this potential client who wants to run a value add program in Austin, Texas. And so once again, if you had not had this ability to slice and dice it, you'd have been calling on 189 targets that may or may not have been actionable. But now you get to call on the 32 of the most actionable properties by the ability to slice and dice it like that. And, just going back in here, you can just see all of the different things that you can search on. So once one of our brokers gets books and records, T12 rent roll, asks a few questions, we simply request underwriting through the platform. We upload through the platform, and within 24 to 48 hours later, we get back a full discounted cash flow model, and we then provide some feedback. Brokers and the managing directors look at the model and determine if the right comps were used by the underwriting team, the right debt strategy. They look at concessions and concession loss, things like that. We provide feedback on the model, and then the underwriting team creates what we call the offered valuation estimate, which is a fancy name for a broker price opinion. But we do it in such a way, we want to display the property and the model so that we can get pricing consensus. So this is our OV. It's really kind of like a listing presentation in a way, because what we're doing is we're going back to the seller and say, "Dear Mr. Seller, thank you for providing books and records. We're underwriting this asset in a valuation between a range of $44,600,000 to $46,500,000. This is our price per door." We send this to the seller as well to show them, so they get to take a look at it. But what we've done is, here are underwriting notes. Here is the actual model. And let me find one that actually has a lot of backup in here. I think Pacific on Green does. So once again, valuation, that's a pretty similar value. But if we look at here, you're going to see more detailed underwriting notes. You're going to see what we're solving for as far as a cash on cash or an IRR. And here are all the backup. They're the actual Red IQ model that you can download. As Red IQ models are very comprehensive and difficult to sort of go through. So what we've done is we've taken the model and broken it down into its big pieces of pricing, that the things that drive pricing. We've created a purchase price sensitivity analysis where we're solving for either a cap rate or an internal rate of return. And then we're looking on both sides of that to come up with a standard deviation on both sides of that to come up with a price range. We have, once again, the demographics, but we've actually put the comps onto the map, which this is a student housing comp. So we have the comps are kind of scattered. But normally the owner knows that these are the proper sale and rental comps. And these comps are also dynamic. You can actually go shop those comps. We come up with our investment and debt summary. So what we're doing is we're going through this with the seller, trying to get agreement on the individual parts of the model, the individual drivers of pricing. Because if we can get consensus on our assumptions, if they agree with us what we're doing with vacancy, you're at 9.2 now, we're going to burn it down to 5%. Your loss to lease is actually pretty good. I think we're actually going to pull that back up to 1%. Your concessions are high, right? This is a newer property going through lease up, so we're going to take your concessions down. So we're going through all these things. We've developed a cash flow statement, both historical, T12, T9, T6, T3, and T1, and then we do a pro forma. And once again, these are sophisticated apartment ownership groups. They are looking at this, on a month-by-month basis themselves. So property characteristics, obviously, they know all about. But if we can get consensus on these individual drivers of pricing, are these the right comps? Is this the right debt strategy? Is this are these the right documents that we're using for backup? well, then they're going to have a hard time getting out of this price range. And what we're trying to do is make sure that if they agree with our price range, then we're going to go and either get them offers because we've either been hired by a specific buyer to go look for specific property, like the value add example I just did in Austin, where that was a buyer saying, go find me this asset, this specific type of asset. Or if our broker runs across just a motivated seller, we can then use our buyer match technology, which I'm just going to show you in just a second, and actually sell it through a private deal process. But if we can get the ideas to get consensus on this number. Now, if we're off somewhere, let's say they think that, maybe sometimes if there was a value add program, like we didn't have one here, but they may say something like, well, I've been spending $8,000 per turn and getting a $200 rent bump. And you're telling me that you need to spend $12,000 per turn to get a $150 rent bump. Well, we'll go back because that's information we didn't have before. So we'll go back and adjust the model and come back to them with a revised price. And so we're going to work to get consensus from the seller because we do not want to present a property that's clearly overpriced. We look bad with it. It's just a waste of time, especially the last 3 years with what's happened in the marketplace. So we're working hard to get consensus from the seller so that then we can then take it to a buyer or put it through the private sales process, and then we can substantiate that price. Very important. So let's say, let's say the Pacific on Green, they decide, yeah, you know what, I'm open to getting offers on this. What's the next step? In a private process. I don't want to do a public process because guess what? I listed it in 2023, didn't work. I listed in 2024, didn't work. And I don't want to go through that whole, rigmarole of a public process again. Well, I can come in here. I can go to my buyer match algorithm and I can type in, and I'll just use every property has its own offered ID. And I'm just going to type in one that I've got on my desk. All right, so this is Landover Legacy Lakes. It's 301 units built in 2016. It's an A-class property in Dallas North. So what this does is it looks for similar properties. So it looks almost like a appraiser would. And then what it does is look for similar properties. It looks at the ownership groups of similar properties. And then it looks for markets that are similar where there is a crossover of ownership between markets. So owners that own in Dallas North also own in Dallas Suburban, Fort Worth, Austin, Houston, Atlanta, Phoenix, Denver, Raleigh, Durham, and Charlotte. We know that because there are approximately 26,000 owners of multifamily properties, 50 units and up in the entire country. We have cataloged every single buyer's behaviors. We know their inventory and what they've purchased the last 5 years. So we're going out there and we're determining based on ownership group's current inventory and their buying behaviors over the last 5 years, most important, the last 3 years, which companies or which owners are most likely to buy this asset. And so here we have suggested 801 potential buyers of this property. 90% of the time, we correctly identify the final buyer. What we do with these 801, instead of emailing it out to thousands and thousands, in a shotgun approach, we can now market directly to these 800. And if the broker has discretion, they may say that this is too big of a list and they can remove one of the lesser markets. There's not as much crossover between Dallas and Charlotte or Raleigh, Durham. You can remove these markets and redo the buyer count. So you can remove that, and then you can re-estimate the buyer count because the brokers actually, we outreach. So now we're down to 704. And we go out and we outreach to these folks through phone call, email, and occasionally text if they allow us to text them, letting them know that we have a deal in Dallas, built in the mid 2000s, approximately 300 to 350 units, with a favorable debt assumption, whatever that is, and we send it to these groups, and we invite them in to a private deal room. So the private deal room looks very much like, the information looks a lot like the OBE. It's really, and let me show you the offers. These are the private listings, what we're listing right now. There's 48 of them. And if you log in, they look very much like the OBE, because what we've done is we take the OBE and we turn it into a digital OM. So rather than having to go through, the traditional process of, PDF OMs, we have created a digital OM that looks a lot like the OBE, a little more detailed. And what we do, though, is we invite them in through, so these are our offered listings, but we invite them in to a private deal room and display that OBE. And then once they see the OBE, the valuation range, they can then pursue the deal. So only people that were invited, that were either in our system already or that the buyer match tool identified, can get in to see this. And you can't forward it on to your friends. It is truly a private deal process. You can ask us to allow your friend in, because we have to put their email in to allow them into the private deal room. But that's how we can have a competitive process, marketing these deals privately without a full public process. And this has proven to be very, I'll show you there's some of these, we've got some pretty big listings in here. In fact, because institutional groups who have been burned over the last, over this last cycle, going to market, and not failing to sell, are very, very gun shy right now. Here's a $130 million senior housing portfolio that only way they were willing to list it was through the private process. And so we did a very extensive digital OM in this case. Look at all of the supporting documents. But, a lot of institutional groups now are wanting to use this process rather than go through the public process again. Because remember that all of the brokers out there are doing the same thing. It's a commodity. They're all selling the same thing. I think we're the only ones who are able to bring organization to this sort of, I guess you could somewhat call it off market, but really it's organization to the process of dispositions without a public process, without a full public process. Last thing I'm going to show you before I open it up for some questions is our client dashboard. So any client, and we have different levels of clientele. Some of our clients, to become an offered client, the very minimum you have to do is give us your buy box. So we understand what you want to purchase, in what markets, what your investment thesis is, your cost of capital, how long you've been in business, and then we load up into our back-end system your buy box. And so here, this is a dummy account, but this recommended deals are the on-market deals that our system is finding. And what they do is we send them an email once a week with every public deal, every publicly marketed deal that meets their buy box in the country. And we send it to them. Send it to them by email, but then it also populates their client dashboard so they can see that these are all publicly marketed deals. My deals are offered private deals. So these are off-market deals where we have a motivated seller that wants to sell our asset. Nobody else knows about these except for offered clients. And here they can engage with it, submit an LOI, pass. And then if you do submit LOIs, we track your LOIs here. So it's a client dashboard. Here are all the deals that we're recommending. Here are all the deals that we found that nobody else knows about. And then here's what's going on with your LOI. We also have a portfolio management tool, which is getting more and more sophisticated by the day. But here's a simple, and this is once again a dummy account, but one of the things it shows you is buyer count. So this is, if I'm the owner of Sloan's Lake West, I know that Offered has identified 344 potential buyers for my property. So maybe I want to sell Sloan's Lake West. I can hit get offers, boom. and Offered is going to get to work contacting these 344 people to see if one of them wants to buy this. I can also get debt, get equity. These provide leads to our capital markets team. We also have a market analytic section, so all of the markets that you're active in. And so what happens when you become an Offered client is your portfolio automatically populates here, because once again, we know every ownership group what they own. So, and then, like maybe you're a LP on something that we didn't know about. You can always add a property manually as well. So you basically get to track your portfolio. And then let's say you're in Austin and you want to know what deliveries look like next 6 months, next 12 months, next 24 months. And finally, they start to drop off. So Austin, as of this morning, was the worst market for rent growth with a negative 4.19, I believe. Same thing with rental trends, 5 years, 10 years, and sales trends, last 5 years, last 10 years, and occupancy trends. And then we have AI has written a market report that updates, I believe, monthly. So that's about it for the Offered platform. We do have an Offered AI that really is designed more for the client's side. We have an Offered, we do have Offered AI, a chat GPT that sits on top of all the database. It helps us create newsletters, hyper local market reports, and prospecting plans, things like that. I'm not going to demo it right now because it is, talk about a data hog. It sits on top of 10 years of multifamily history and the entire Offered CRM. So our brokers use it, though, to be more efficient. Here, our clients use the Offered AI to do simple searches like, what are Class A properties selling for in Tampa over the last 5 years, things like that. So I'm going to now turn off my presentation, turn on my camera, and ask if anybody has any questions. Nobody have any questions at all? Okay. Well, I guess we will send out a recording of this, and if anyone has any questions, my email is greg@offered.com, and we're happy to answer any questions for you. There you go. Thanks, Sharon. And everybody have a great day, and thanks for attending. And we'll talk to you guys soon. Take care.